Adam Taxin on June 11th, 2015 with Rabbi Avi Rubenfeld of Chabad of Chesterfield. That's at chabadofchesterfield.com. Talking about the current reading in Numbers, toward the beginning of Numbers, about the spies. Now, Rabbi, thanks for joining me. But, when people aren't that knowledgeable about Judaism, as a lot of people in the audience here are not, they hear the word spies and they think of James Bond. And I'm just hoping you could give an explanation at a very basic level about what this week's Parsha, aka reading, is about in the Torah, and why it's relevant to us and the lessons we can learn.
That's a great question. Thank you, Adam. Actually, the James Bond reference is not such a far-off reference, because many of the miracles that did occur for them, which won't be in this basic class, but did actually, it was way beyond James Bond. Let's just leave it at that. But the very basic story is as follows. Historically, we're talking about in the year 2449 of creation. This is when the Jewish people had, a year earlier, left Egypt after being enslaved for 210 years. And leaving Egypt was after a year-long series of miracles of the 10 plagues. And the Jewish people took 50 days to journey from Egypt, and within the first 7 of those days, they were running away from the Egyptians. On the 7th day was when the splitting of the sea occurred, and then the Egyptians were drowned, and we no longer had to worry about them. And then we made our journey from there until the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. So we reached Sinai on the first day of Sivan, and you're talking about just shy of 40 days afterwards, and the 50th day from when we left Egypt, we actually arrived, that we received the Torah. It wasn't the 50th day that we arrived at Sinai. We arrived at Sinai 6 days before receiving the Torah. So when we received the Torah, we spent a year at the foot of the mountain studying with Moses, being taught and learning all about how to live as a Jew. And then we started our journey to our homeland, the land of Israel, and God had promised us. However, we wanted to see, even though God promised us the land, and it is a good land, and it's a land flowing with the milk and honey and full of blessings, the Jewish people wanted to send spies. Naturally so, when you're going to war, even though God promised to perform the war for us, or to fight the war for us, we wanted to see the land, find out about it, spy out. So they requested of Moses to be able to send spies. Moses himself was not too thrilled by the idea, would have rather we have taken God's word for it, but he, as a faithful servant, conveyed the request to Hashem, to God, and God in turn said, Shelach lecha, send for yourself spies. And that's the title of this week's Torah portion, and that's the topic of the week, because these 12 spies, God instructed Moses to take distinguished people. He took not the princes of the tribes, but very, very important people from the tribes, who were all very righteous people. And their job, Moses instructed them, was to simply go scout out the land of Israel. Essentially bring back a report of the goodness of the land that God is giving us, so that we can know firsthand with human flesh eyes how great the land is that God promised us. Now, somewhere along that line, these spies who did go, a group of 12 people, scout out physically the land of Israel, and they came back with a corrupt message, unfortunately. They didn't fulfill what their job was, which is to go bring a report of how good the land is. Instead of, they changed their job description to tell us whether or not we can conquer the land, and that was never their request, that was never their mission. So the very basic function of the spy was to go and bring back a report of how wonderful the land of Israel was. Not necessarily how we can conquer the land, not necessarily all of the other details that they did mention, but they actually brought back with them produce of the land of Israel. And it says that the land of Israel's produce was so amazing and abundant that it took a group of them to be able to carry one cluster of grapes. That's how huge the food in Israel were growing. It was a land that was blessed not just with milk and honey, but with tremendous blessings. So instead of using that as a demonstration of look how good the land that God gave us is, instead they said, look at this land. The people in this land are giants. Look at their food. Even their food is much bigger than we are.
Right.
There's no way we can conquer them. And that's essentially the very basic function of what the spies were told to do, unfortunately what they didn't do. And as a result, God said, it took you 40 days to spy out the land. For each day that you spent corrupting your mission, I'm going to allow you to spend a year in the desert until that generation will die out, and the next generation will be worthy to enter the land of Israel.
Let me play devil's advocate a little bit here. For a skeptic who may be listening to this and saying Judaism is ridiculous. Isn't that a little bit harsh of a punishment for it was only 10 people who did this because Joshua and Caleb did not go along with it, but all they did was give a negative report when they may well have thought that was their job to do it. I mean, where's the justice there?
That's a very good question. To use the term punishment would be a misunderstanding. It's not so much of a punishment. It's actually, in reality, and here's where you get a little deeper into the psyche of what the spies were saying and why the Jewish people agreed with them. Incidentally, the day that they came back and gave their negative report that the Jewish people cried was the 9th of Av, otherwise known as Tisha B'Av, and that day all the Jewish people cried upon hearing the spies report and said, we can't go to the land, we don't want to go to the land of Israel. So what the psyche behind it, the motivation behind the spies coming back and saying this was, you have to realize they were living, in a sense, essentially in paradise. Even though, yes, they were in the desert, they were surrounded by these clouds, they benefited from not having to work for a living. Their bread fell from heaven. Their water came from a rock. From a well that traveled with them. They essentially didn't have to work for a living.
Sounds like socialism.
They spent 24 hours a day studying the Torah. So their real motivation was hopefully, if we turn down the land of Israel, we'll remain in paradise their whole life. So, and that might be, by the way, an altruistic goal. I want to be spiritual. I don't want to be materialistic. However, God said, I'm not really looking for you to be an angel. I have angels. I created you to be people to work with the world, to be within the world, yet above it and influence it and inspire it. But God's answer to them is, you know what? You're not cut out for that. You really don't want to work with the physical, so you won't have to work with the physical. Your generation will remain in the desert, in this heaven that you're looking for, but the next generation will be fit to uplift the land and to work with the world. So it's not so much of a punishment as much as a consequence. They got their wish.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like you can get political on this and say socialism is not the ideal state. And you can also make a point toward so many people today who want to learn all day as adults and not earn a living. And I know that's a big criticism of a lot of Orthodox Jews, the yeshivish mentality. Not that we're going to get into that here, but I mean, I know people have made that interpretation. But let me just bring this back because I don't want to go too long and scare people off with the length of this YouTube clip. What are the most practical lessons we can learn from this reading?
Actually, on a practical level, you have to delve into the Hasidic teachings, the spiritual side of things, and actually the 10 spies, right? Because the 2 spies, as you mentioned accurately, did not succumb to the test. They chose to do God's will and give a positive report. Actually, who scouted out the land represent the 10 character traits of your soul, and which is also the 10 character components of your psyche. And a Jew needs to know that we, with the ability of the Moses, of the Tzaddik of our generation, have the ability to, in fact, imbue our land of Israel, which is the 4 square, the 4 amas, which is the 4 cubits of your physical interaction. Each and every one of us has a small world, our own circle of influence. And our job is to be able to take that circle of influence and imbue it with inspiration from God and from godliness. So the real message of the spies is to teach us that our job is not to shy away from being a positive influence on all of those that we encounter in our life. If we live as a Jew, if we walk down the street as a Jew, if we even take the mundane little details such as tying our shoes, and we imbue them with being a Jew, then we have fulfilled. We haven't succumbed to the test, if you will, that the Spies do. Whereas if we want to be removed from the world, or even worse, if we want to say that we're not relevant to the spiritual component and we're just going to live in the world and survive, then we're failing our own test of the Spies as well. Our job is to recognize that every one of us has the capability of entering our land of Israel and making our life into a holy life and a holy place.
Rabbi Rubenfeld, thank you.